Welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving into a compelling story titled, Tangled Hearts, A Cheating Wife's Dilemma. This gripping tale explores the complexities of love, loyalty, and the intense emotions that come with forbidden desires. Follow Anna as she navigates the delicate balance between her commitment to her husband David and the unexpected connection she forms with his best friend Mark. It's a journey of self-discovery, heartache, and ultimately, the search for redemption. Stay tuned as we unravel the twists and turns of this captivating narrative. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more incredible stories. We moved in on a breezy Monday afternoon in the summer of 2018, the kind of day where the sunlight seems to wash over everything with a promise of new starts. The house, a quaint three-story with a charming green door, felt like a fresh canvas. My husband David and his best friend Mark were laughing over a shared joke, something about their last disastrous camping trip. I watched them, a smile tugging at my lips, appreciating the ease of their friendship. David, with his usual flair for handling things, directed the movers efficiently, pointing out where each box should go. Mark, who had decided to stay with us temporarily after his recent breakup, was surprisingly helpful, unpacking boxes in the kitchen and setting things up. I had my reservations about living with Mark. He was the kind of person who could light up a room with his laughter, yet there was an intensity in his eyes that sometimes made you look away first. I liked him well enough, but the closeness was new to me. We were friends, sure, but the dynamic of living together was something entirely different. The house was a beautiful three-story structure with a spacious backyard and a charming green door that seemed to welcome us into a new chapter of our lives. The garden was filled with blooming flowers and neatly trimmed hedges, a haven that promised peace and tranquility. The living room, with its large windows and cozy fireplace, felt like the perfect place to build new memories. As the movers carried in the last few boxes, David took a moment to stand back and admire our new home. He turned to me, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "This place is perfect, isn't it, Anna?" I nodded, feeling a rush of warmth. "It really is, David. I can't believe we're finally here." Mark walked over, carrying a box labeled, Kitchen. He set it down and wiped his brow, a satisfied grin on his face. "You guys did well. This place is amazing." David clapped Mark on the back. "Thanks, man. And thanks for helping out today. I know it's been a tough time for you." Mark shrugged, his smile fading slightly. "It's no problem. Actually, it's good to have something to do. Keeps my mind off things." I watched the two of them, feeling a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. Mark had always been a part of our lives, but this was different. Living under the same roof would be a new experience for all of us. We spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking and arranging furniture. David and Mark worked on setting up the living room, arguing good-naturedly over where the couch should go. I focused on the kitchen, placing dishes in the cupboards and organizing the pantry. Every now and then, I would glance out the window at the garden, already envisioning warm summer evenings spent outside. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the house, David suggested we take a break. "How about we order some pizza and have a little celebration?" he proposed. "Sounds perfect," I agreed, feeling a pang of hunger. Mark nodded in agreement. "I'll go grab some drinks from the store. Be back in a few." As Mark headed out, David and I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but happy. "Can you believe we're finally here?" David asked, his arm draped around my shoulders. "It's like a dream," I replied, leaning into him. "A wonderful, exhausting dream." When Mark returned, we set up a makeshift dining area in the living room. We sat on the floor, using a coffee table as our dining table, and shared pizza and cold beers. The conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and stories of the past. It felt good to unwind and enjoy the moment, despite the lingering tension I felt about our new living arrangement. After dinner, we continued to unpack and settle into the house. The process was slow but enjoyable, each item finding its place in our new home. By the time we finished, it was late, and we were all ready to call it a night. David and I headed upstairs to our bedroom, leaving Mark to settle into the guest room on the first floor. As we climbed into bed, David pulled me close. It's going to be great, Anna, he whispered. This house, this new beginning, it's exactly what we need. I smiled, feeling a sense of contentment wash over me. I know, David, I feel it too. We drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, the promise of a new start filling our dreams. The next morning dawned bright and early. David and I were awakened by the chirping of birds outside our window. I stretched lazily, feeling the soft morning light warm my skin. David groaned and pulled the covers over his head. 5 more minutes, he mumbled. I laughed and kissed his cheek. Come on, sleepyhead. We've got a lot to do today. David reluctantly got out of bed, and we both got ready for the day. As we headed downstairs, we found Mark already in the kitchen, brewing a pot of coffee. He looked up and greeted us with a smile. Good morning. Coffee's almost ready. Thanks, Mark, I said, appreciating the gesture. You're a lifesaver. We sat around the kitchen island, sipping our coffee and planning out the day. There was still so much to do, more unpacking, organizing, and getting the house fully set up. David had a list of tasks, and he was determined to tackle them all. All right, let's get to it, David said, clapping his hands together. Anna, you take the upstairs rooms. Mark and I will handle the garage and the yard. I nodded, feeling a surge of energy. Got it, let's do this. We spent the day working hard, each of us focused on our tasks. As I unpacked boxes and arranged our belongings in the bedrooms, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and excitement. This was our home, and every little detail mattered. By midday, we took a break for lunch. Mark had prepared sandwiches, and we sat on the back porch, enjoying the beautiful weather and the view of our new garden. It was a peaceful moment, a reminder of why we had chosen this house. In the afternoon, David received a call from work. I could see the change in his expression as he listened, his brows furrowing in concern. When he hung up, he turned to us with an apologetic look. Sorry, guys, but I have to head into the office tomorrow. There's a situation that needs my attention, he explained, his voice tinged with frustration. I wasn't surprised. David's job as a software engineer for a startup often demanded sudden trips to solve crises. Mark clapped him on the back, offering words of encouragement. Don't worry, man. We'll hold down the fort here. David smiled, though I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. That evening, after David had packed for his unexpected business trip, we sat together on our new couch, a plush blue that felt like sinking into a cloud. Mark joined us with 3 glasses of wine, handing one to each of us with a smile. To new beginnings, he toasted, and we all echoed the sentiment. As the night deepened, we talked about everything and nothing, movies we loved, places we wanted to visit, and the funny quirks of life. David's laughter filled the room, and I felt a warmth spread through me. But every now and then, my gaze drifted to Mark, who seemed more reserved than usual. When David excused himself to finalize his packing, the air shifted slightly. I was alone with Mark, the silence stretching between us like a tangible thing. He looked at me, a question in his eyes, as if he sensed the change too. We'll be fine here, I assured him, trying to smile. It's just a few days, right? Right, Mark replied, his voice low. Just a few days. As I headed to bed, the image of Mark's earnest face lingered in my mind. I brushed it off, chalking it up to the wine and the stress of the move. Little did I know, the real challenge would begin after the lights were out, in the solitude of my dreams where forbidden thoughts began to stir. The next morning dawned quietly, the house suffused with the soft, muffled sounds of a world slowly waking up. David had left before sunrise, his parting embrace lingering and full of unspoken promises to return soon. The house, however, felt different without his presence, larger, somehow, and more silent. Mark was already in the kitchen when I shuffled in, my slippers scuffing softly against the cool tile floor. He was making coffee, a concentrated frown on his face as he adjusted the settings on our new coffee machine. Morning, I murmured, rubbing sleep from my eyes. Good morning, Mark replied without turning. Coffee will be ready in a minute. Hope you like it strong. I nodded, settling at the kitchen island. The morning light spilled through the window, casting long shadows on the floor. I watched Mark, noticing the way his shoulders tensed as he worked. There was a carefulness to his movements, a precision that was oddly calming to observe. As he placed a steaming cup in front of me, our fingers brushed briefly, sending an unexpected jolt through me. I quickly pulled my hand back, surprised by my reaction. "Thanks," I said, trying to sound casual. We sipped our coffee in silence, the only sound the occasional clink of a spoon against a mug. It was comfortable, yet charged with an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite identify. "So, any plans for today?" Mark finally broke the silence, looking at me with curious eyes. "Just unpacking, I guess," I replied, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "You? I might work on the upstairs room. Turn it into a proper office," he said. "It'll give me something to do while David's away." The conversation turned to mundane things, household chores, grocery lists. But beneath the everyday banter, my mind kept replaying that brief touch, the warmth of his skin against mine. It was ridiculous, I chided myself. He was just being friendly, nothing more. But that night, as I lay in bed, the dreams came again. This time, they were more vivid, more insistent. Mark's face hovered in my subconscious, his eyes intense and piercing. We were laughing in the dream, close enough that I could feel his breath on my skin. Then the dream shifted, and we were no longer laughing. Instead, his lips were pressed against mine, urgent and warm. I woke up with a start, my breath ragged, my heart racing. The room was dark, the shadows stretching across the ceiling like dark fingers. I lay there, trying to calm my racing heart, trying to convince myself it was just a dream. But the remnants of his touch lingered, both in my mind and on my lips, as real as anything I had ever felt. The next few days followed a similar pattern. By day, Mark and I kept our separate tasks, our interactions polite and distant. But by night, my dreams painted a different picture, one filled with forbidden touches and whispered promises. It was during one of these nights, as I lay awake pondering the confusing mix of reality and dreams, that I heard a noise downstairs. Slipping out of bed, I padded softly down the stairs, only to find Mark in the living room, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring out at the moonlit garden. He didn't hear me approach, and for a moment, I simply watched him. The moonlight cast his profile in relief, shadows playing across his face, giving him an ethereal look. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked softly, not wanting to startle him. Mark turned, a slight smile playing on his lips. "Something like that," he replied. "You?" "Same," I said, walking into the room. "It's weird, isn't it? How big the house feels when it's just us." "Yeah," he agreed, his voice low. "It does feel different." We talked then, more openly than we had before, about everything and nothing. As the night deepened, I realized how easy it was to talk to him, how comforting his presence had become. And for the first time, I allowed myself to wonder what it might be like if the dreams weren't just dreams. That night marked a shift in the air between us. The house didn't feel empty with just Mark and me. It felt charged, alive with unspoken possibilities. As the days passed, our interactions became layered with an intensity neither of us acknowledged aloud but felt deeply. One afternoon, I found myself in the garden, trimming the rose bushes that David had planted last spring. The sun was warm on my back, a gentle breeze playing with strands of my hair. I was lost in thought when Mark stepped outside, carrying 2 glasses of iced lemonade. "Thought you could use a break," he said, handing me a glass. His fingers lingered slightly longer than necessary, and I felt that now familiar jolt of electricity. "Thanks, Mark," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's really hot today, isn't it?" "Yeah, it is." He paused, watching me for a moment. "You've been working hard out here." We sat on the edge of the porch, sipping our lemonade in comfortable silence. I glanced at him, noticing the beads of sweat on his forehead, the way his shirt clung to his muscles. My heart skipped, and I quickly looked away, feeling a flush rise to my cheeks. The conversation flowed easily, drifting from mundane topics to more personal ones. Mark talked about his family, his aspirations, and for the first time, his feelings about the breakup. I listened, my heart aching a bit for him, seeing him in a new light. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, Mark turned to me. "You know, I really appreciate this," he said softly. "Talking like this, it means a lot." "I feel the same," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. The air felt thick, heavy with the weight of our mutual confession. It was then that the wind picked up, sending a gust that scattered petals around us. Laughing, Mark reached out to brush a petal from my hair. His touch was gentle, tentative, but it sparked a fire that I could no longer ignore. I looked up at him, our eyes locking. The laughter faded, replaced by a tension so palpable I could almost hear it crackling in the air between us. His hand lingered by my face, his fingers lightly caressing my cheek. "Mark," I started, my voice trembling with the magnitude of what we were teetering on the brink of. He leaned in, his breath mingling with mine. "I know," he murmured. "I feel it too." And then, in a moment that felt both like an eternity and a heartbeat, his lips met mine. The kiss was soft at first, questioning, as if he were asking for permission. When I didn't pull away, it deepened, becoming more urgent, more insistent. My mind screamed for me to stop, to think of David, to think of the consequences. But my heart drowned out the protests with its pounding, driving me closer to Mark, pulling me deeper into the kiss that I knew would change everything. When we finally broke apart, breathless and stunned, the world seemed to realign itself into a new, dangerous configuration. "We shouldn't have done that," I whispered, my voice laced with equal parts regret and desire. "I know," Mark replied, his voice rough. "But I don't think I can pretend anymore." As we stood there, the last rays of the sun sinking below the horizon, I knew that we had crossed a line from which there was no easy return. The shadows lengthened, casting our figures as one on the soft earth, a symbol of our newly tangled lives. The next morning dawned quietly, the house suffused with the soft, muffled sounds of a world slowly waking up. David had left before sunrise, his parting embrace lingering and full of unspoken promises to return soon. The house, however, felt different without his presence, larger, somehow, and more silent. Mark was already in the kitchen when I shuffled in, my slippers scuffing softly against the cool tile floor. He was making coffee, a concentrated frown on his face as he adjusted the settings on our new coffee machine. "Morning," I murmured, rubbing sleep from my eyes. "Good morning," Mark replied without turning. "Coffee will be ready in a minute. Hope you like it strong." I nodded, settling at the kitchen island. The morning light spilled through the window, casting long shadows on the floor. I watched Mark, noticing the way his shoulders tensed as he worked. There was a carefulness to his movements, a precision that was oddly calming to observe. As he placed a steaming cup in front of me, our fingers brushed briefly, sending an unexpected jolt through me. I quickly pulled my hand back, surprised by my reaction. "Thanks," I said, trying to sound casual. We sipped our coffee in silence, the only sound the occasional clink of a spoon against a mug. It was comfortable, yet charged with an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite identify. "So, any plans for today?" Mark finally broke the silence, looking at me with curious eyes. "Just unpacking, I guess," I replied, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "You?" "I might work on the upstairs room. Turn it into a proper office," he said. "It'll give me something to do while David's away." The conversation turned to mundane things, household chores, grocery lists. But beneath the everyday banter, my mind kept replaying that brief touch, the warmth of his skin against mine. It was ridiculous, I chided myself. He was just being friendly, nothing more. As the day progressed, I immersed myself in the task of unpacking and organizing. I tackled the bedrooms first, arranging clothes and personal items, trying to create a sense of home. Each room slowly transformed from a cluttered space filled with boxes into a cozy and inviting haven. It was satisfying work, but my mind kept wandering back to the brief moments with Mark. In the afternoon, I heard the sound of a hammer and nails from the upstairs room where Mark was working. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check on his progress. I found him kneeling on the floor, assembling a desk. He looked up and smiled as I entered. Hey, Anna, how's it going downstairs? Good, I replied, glancing around the room. You've made a lot of progress up here. Yeah, I thought I'd get the office set up first. It'll be nice to have a dedicated workspace, he said, standing up and wiping his hands on his jeans. I walked over to the window, looking out at the garden below. It's a beautiful view from here. Perfect for an office. Mark joined me at the window, standing close enough that our shoulders almost touched. Yeah, it is, he agreed softly. For a moment, we stood in silence, taking in the view. The garden was bathed in the warm afternoon light, flowers swaying gently in the breeze. It was a peaceful scene, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. Do you need any help? I asked, breaking the silence. Sure, if you're up for it, Mark replied, his tone light. We spent the next hour working together, assembling furniture and organizing the room. It was easy, comfortable work, and I found myself enjoying his company more than I had expected. We talked about everything and nothing, favorite books, past travels, and funny childhood memories. Each story and laugh seemed to bring us closer, easing the tension that had built up since David's departure. As we finished setting up the desk, Mark looked at me, his eyes warm. Thanks for the help, Anna. This would have taken me twice as long on my own. You're welcome, I said, feeling a flush of warmth. It was fun. We stood there for a moment, the room filled with a comfortable silence. Then Mark's expression grew more serious. Anna, about the other night. I just want you to know that I'm here for you. I know things are complicated right now, but I don't want you to feel alone. I looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there. Thank you, Mark. That means a lot to me. He reached out and gently squeezed my hand. The touch was brief, but it sent a shiver down my spine. We'll get through this, he said softly. That evening, I decided to make a special dinner. Cooking had always been a way for me to relax and unwind, and I hoped it would help clear my mind. I chose a recipe for chicken marsala, one of David's favorites, and set to work in the kitchen. Mark joined me, offering to help with the preparation. We moved around the kitchen in a familiar dance, chopping vegetables and stirring sauces. It felt natural, like we had done this 100 times before. As the delicious aromas filled the air, I found myself smiling more and worrying less. When dinner was ready, we sat down at the dining table, the flickering candlelight creating a cozy atmosphere. We toasted with glasses of wine, clinking them together with a shared sense of accomplishment. To surviving the first day without David, Mark joked, raising his glass. I laughed, feeling a sense of camaraderie. To surviving, I echoed, taking a sip of my wine. The conversation flowed easily throughout the meal. We talked about our hopes and dreams, sharing stories that revealed new facets of our personalities. I learned about Mark's passion for photography and his dream of traveling the world to capture its beauty. In return, I shared my love for writing and my aspiration to one day publish a novel. As the evening wore on, the wine and the warmth of the conversation created a relaxed and intimate atmosphere. It was in these moments that I felt the barriers between us begin to fade. The connection I felt with Mark was undeniable, and I struggled to keep my emotions in check. After dinner, we moved to the living room, bringing our wine glasses with us. We settled onto the couch, the same plush blue couch where we had shared laughs and stories with David just days before. The familiarity of the setting made the moment feel both comforting and charged with a new tension. Do you want to watch a movie? Mark suggested, reaching for the remote. Sure, that sounds good, I replied, grateful for the distraction. We chose a light-hearted comedy, something to keep the mood easy and fun. As the movie played, I found myself leaning closer to Mark, drawn by the comfort of his presence. Our shoulders brushed, and I felt a spark of electricity at the contact. It was a simple touch, but it sent a ripple of awareness through me. Halfway through the movie, Mark turned to me, his expression serious. Anna, there's something I need to say. I paused the movie, giving him my full attention. What is it? He took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto mine. I care about you, Anna. More than I should. I know it's complicated, and I don't want to make things harder for you, but I can't keep pretending that I don't feel this way. My heart raced as his words sank in. I had known, on some level, that our connection was deeper than friendship, but hearing him say it out loud made it real. Mark, He held up a hand, stopping me. You don't have to say anything. I just needed to be honest with you. I respect whatever you decide, but I had to let you know how I feel. The air between us felt heavy with unspoken words and emotions. I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. Thank you for being honest, Mark. I care about you too, but this is all so new and confusing. I need time to figure things out. He nodded, his expression softening. I understand. Take all the time you need. I'm here for you, no matter what. We resumed the movie, but my mind was far from the screen. The weight of Mark's confession and my own conflicted feelings pressed down on me. I knew that whatever happened next would change everything. That night, as I lay in bed, my thoughts raced. I replayed the events of the day, the moments of connection with Mark, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The dreams came again, vivid and insistent, blurring the lines between reality and fantasy. Mark's face, his touch, his words haunted my sleep, leaving me restless and yearning for answers. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to clear my mind with a run. I laced up my sneakers and headed out the door, the cool morning air a welcome relief. As I ran through the quiet streets of our neighborhood, I tried to sort through my tangled emotions. I loved David. He was my husband, my partner, the person I had chosen to spend my life with. But the connection I felt with Mark was undeniable, a pull that I couldn't ignore. I knew I needed to talk to David, to be honest with him about everything, but the thought of hurting him tore at my heart. When I returned home, Mark was in the kitchen, making breakfast. He looked up as I walked in, his expression a mix of concern and hope. How was your run? Good, I replied, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. I needed to clear my head. He nodded, understanding. I made some eggs and toast. Thought you might be hungry. Thanks, Mark. That sounds great. We sat down to eat, the silence between us comfortable yet charged with the weight of unspoken words. As we finished breakfast, I knew I couldn't avoid the conversation any longer. Mark, we need to talk, I said, setting down my fork. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anticipation and fear. Okay, I need to be honest with David, I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He deserves to know what's been going on, how I feel. I can't keep this a secret any longer. Mark nodded slowly, his expression resigned. I understand. It's the right thing to do. I don't know how he'll react, but I owe it to him to be truthful, I continued. And I need to figure out where I stand, what I want. He reached across the table and took my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. Whatever happens, I'm here for you, Anna. I care about you, and I want you to be happy. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I squeezed his hand. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that more than you know. That evening, I called David. He was still busy with work, but I told him I needed to talk to him as soon as he had a moment. The urgency in my voice must have been clear, because he promised to call back later that night. When the phone rang, I took a deep breath and answered. Hey, David. Hey, Anna. What's going on? You sounded worried earlier. I closed my eyes, steeling myself for what I had to say. David, there's something I need to tell you. It's about Mark and me. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. Okay, I'm listening. I took a deep breath and began to explain everything. The growing connection with Mark, the feelings I couldn't ignore, and the struggle I had been facing. I tried to be as honest and straightforward as possible, knowing that he deserved the truth. When I finished, the silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, David spoke, his voice tight with emotion. I don't know what to say, Anna. This is a lot to take in. I know, I said softly, tears streaming down my face. I'm so sorry, David. I never wanted to hurt you. He took a deep breath, his voice trembling. I need some time to process this. I'll call you back when I can. Okay, I whispered. Take all the time you need. When the call ended, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I had done what I needed to do, but the uncertainty of what would come next loomed large. I knew that whatever happened, the road ahead would be difficult and fraught with challenges. Mark found me sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. He sat down beside me, his presence a comforting anchor in the storm of emotions. How did it go? I shook my head, unable to find the words. He needs time to process it. Mark nodded, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. And so do you. We sat there in silence, the weight of the situation settling around us. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I couldn't face it alone. And for now, that was enough. The days following my conversation with David were some of the most challenging I had ever faced. I spent much of my time in a state of anxious anticipation, waiting for his call and trying to make sense of my own emotions. Mark and I continued to navigate our new reality, careful to maintain a respectful distance while we figured things out. One afternoon, a few days after my call with David, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The neighborhood was quiet, the trees lining the streets offering a comforting shade. As I walked, I thought about the events that had led us to this point. I couldn't deny the connection I felt with Mark, but I also couldn't ignore the love I had for David. The conflict tore at me, leaving me feeling adrift and uncertain. When I returned home, I found Mark in the backyard, tending to the garden. He looked up as I approached, his expression unreadable. "Hey, Anna, how was your walk?" "It helped," I replied, sitting down on the porch steps. "I needed to get out for a bit." He nodded, wiping his hands on a towel. "I understand. It's been a lot to process." We sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the garden filling the space between us. Finally, Mark broke the silence. "Anna, I want you to know that whatever happens, I'll respect your decision. Whether you choose to be with David, with me, or even if you need time alone to figure things out, I'll support you." I looked at him, tears welling up in my eyes. "Thank you, Mark. That means more to me than you know." He reached out and took my hand, his touch gentle and reassuring. "We'll get through this, one way or another." That evening, I received a call from David. My heart pounded as I answered, bracing myself for whatever he had to say. "Hey, David." "Hey, Anna. I've had some time to think, and I want to talk about everything," he said, his voice calm but serious. "Okay," I replied, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm listening." David took a deep breath. "I love you, Anna. I always have, and I always will. But this situation has made me realize that we need to work on our relationship. We've both been so busy and caught up in our own worlds that we lost sight of each other." Tears streamed down my face as I listened to him. "I love you too, David. I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," he said softly. "But we need to be honest with each other, and with ourselves. I want us to go to counseling, to work through this together. I believe we can come out stronger on the other side." The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. "I want that too, David. I want us to work through this." "Then let's do it," he said firmly. "We'll get through this, Anna. Together." After the call ended, I felt a renewed sense of hope. David and I were going to work on our relationship, and that was the most important thing. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to put in the effort. I found Mark in the living room, reading a book. He looked up as I entered, his eyes questioning. "How did it go?" "We're going to work on our relationship," I said, my voice filled with determination. "David wants us to go to counseling and figure things out together." Mark nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "That's good, Anna. I'm glad you're taking that step." "I still care about you, Mark," I said softly. "But I need to focus on my marriage right now." "I understand," he replied, his eyes reflecting a mixture of sadness and acceptance. "I'll always care about you, Anna. And I'll always be here if you need me." With that, a new phase of our lives began. David returned home a few days later, and true to his word, we started counseling. The sessions were intense and emotional, forcing us to confront issues we had ignored for too long. But with each session, I felt us growing closer, rebuilding the bond that had once been so strong. Mark, true to his promise, gave us the space we needed. He found a small apartment nearby and moved out, leaving behind a note expressing his gratitude for the time he had spent with us and his hope that we would find happiness. Despite the emotional roller coaster, David and I began to find our rhythm again. We started spending more quality time together, rediscovering the things we loved about each other. The house, which had once felt so empty, now felt like a home again. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, David turned to me, his eyes filled with warmth. "I'm proud of us, Anna. We've been through so much, but we're stronger for it." I smiled, leaning into him. "I am too, David. I love you." "I love you too," he replied, kissing my forehead. "And I always will." As the days turned into weeks, the pain of the past began to fade. David and I continued to work on our relationship, finding joy in the little moments and building new memories together. The lessons we had learned, about honesty, communication, and the strength of our love, shaped our lives in ways we couldn't have imagined. And while the future remained uncertain, I knew that as long as we faced it together, we could overcome anything. The process of rebuilding my relationship with David was both challenging and rewarding. Our counseling sessions were helping us understand each other better and address the issues that had driven a wedge between us. Despite the progress we were making, I couldn't shake the memories of my time with Mark. The dreams I had about him continued, vivid and insistent, blurring the lines between reality and fantasy. One night, after a particularly intense counseling session, I found myself lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. David was asleep beside me, his breathing deep and steady. I envied his ability to find peace so easily, while my mind was a tumultuous sea of emotions. I slipped out of bed and quietly made my way downstairs. The house was silent, the only sound the faint ticking of the clock in the living room. I made myself a cup of tea and settled on the couch, hoping to find some solace in the quiet of the night. As I sipped my tea, my thoughts drifted back to Mark. I missed his presence, the easy conversations we had shared, and the way he had made me feel understood. I knew that focusing on my marriage was the right thing to do, but the longing for what could have been with Mark was always there, just beneath the surface. Lost in my thoughts, I didn't hear David come down the stairs. He found me sitting on the couch, my tea growing cold in my hands. "Anna, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. I looked up, startled. "I couldn't sleep," I admitted. "My mind won't stop racing." David sat down beside me, taking my hand in his. "Do you want to talk about it?" I hesitated, unsure of how to express the conflicting emotions swirling inside me. "It's just everything," I said finally. "The counseling, the memories of Mark, the dreams. I feel like I'm being torn in two." David's expression softened, and he squeezed my hand gently. "I understand, Anna. This hasn't been easy for either of us. But we're making progress, and we'll get through this together." I leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his embrace. "I know. It's just hard sometimes." He held me close, his presence a comforting anchor in the storm of my emotions. "We're going to be okay," he whispered. "We'll take it one day at a time." The next morning, I woke up feeling slightly more at ease. David's support and understanding had helped alleviate some of the weight I had been carrying. As we went about our day, I focused on the positive steps we were taking in our relationship. Despite my efforts to move forward, the dreams about Mark persisted. They were more vivid than ever, filled with moments of laughter, closeness, and a deep emotional connection. In these dreams, we were happy and carefree, free from the complications of reality. One evening, as David and I were preparing dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling of restlessness. The dreams had left me feeling both exhilarated and guilty, a confusing mix of emotions that I struggled to make sense of. "David, can we talk?" I asked, setting down the knife I had been using to chop vegetables. He looked up, concern in his eyes. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I've been having these dreams about Mark. They're so vivid, and they make me feel things that I don't want to feel. It's like my mind won't let me move on." David's expression was thoughtful, and he reached out to take my hand. "Anna, dreams can be powerful, but they don't define us. It's normal to have lingering feelings, especially after everything we've been through. The important thing is how we handle those feelings in our waking life." "I know," I said softly. "But it feels like I'm betraying you every time I dream about him." He shook his head gently. You're not betraying me, Anna. You're human, and you're dealing with a lot. The fact that you're here, working on our relationship, shows how committed you are. We can't control our dreams, but we can control how we respond to them. His words brought a sense of relief, and I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Thank you, David. I needed to hear that. He smiled, pulling me into a warm embrace. We're in this together, Anna. Always. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to navigate the complex emotions that filled my heart. David and I grew closer through our counseling sessions and our efforts to reconnect. We started going on dates again, exploring new places and rediscovering the joy of each other's company. One Saturday afternoon, we decided to visit a nearby park for a picnic. The weather was perfect, with a gentle breeze and clear blue skies. We spread out a blanket under a large oak tree, unpacking the delicious food we had prepared. As we ate, we talked about our hopes and dreams for the future. It was a light-hearted conversation, filled with laughter and shared aspirations. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly happy and at peace. After lunch, we took a leisurely walk through the park, holding hands and enjoying the beauty of nature. The sound of birds chirping and the rustling of leaves created a serene backdrop for our stroll. David stopped by a small pond, pulling me close. Anna, I love you more than words can express. We've been through so much, but I believe that our love is stronger because of it. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I hugged him tightly. I love you too, David. More than anything. As we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, I felt a renewed sense of hope for our future. The journey had been difficult, but we were finding our way back to each other, one step at a time. That night, I had another dream about Mark. But this time, it was different. Instead of the usual scenes of closeness and connection, the dream was filled with a sense of closure. We talked, acknowledging the bond we had shared and the impact it had on our lives. Then, we said goodbye, parting ways with a sense of peace. When I woke up, I felt a sense of clarity and resolution. The dream had given me the closure I needed, allowing me to fully commit to my relationship with David without the lingering feelings of guilt and confusion. As I lay in bed, I realized that the dreams had been a way for my mind to process the emotions I had been struggling with. Now that I had found closure, I could move forward with a renewed sense of purpose and commitment. I turned to David, who was still asleep beside me, and gently brushed a strand of hair from his face. Thank you, I whispered, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for his love and support. The days that followed were filled with a sense of renewal. David and I continued to work on our relationship, growing stronger and more connected with each passing day. The dreams about Mark faded, replaced by a newfound focus on the future we were building together. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, David turned to me, his eyes filled with love and warmth. We've come a long way, Anna. I'm so proud of us. I smiled, leaning into him. I am too, David. I love you more than ever. I love you too, he replied, kissing my forehead. And I always will. As we sat there, wrapped in each other's embrace, I felt a deep sense of peace and contentment. The journey had been difficult, but it had brought us closer together, strengthening our bond and reaffirming our love. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, with a love that was stronger than ever. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed the journey of Tangled Hearts, a cheating wife's dilemma. This story reminds us of the importance of honesty, communication, and the strength it takes to rebuild trust. Anna's experience shows that even in the midst of confusion and heartache, there is always a path to redemption and a chance to find true happiness. If you found this story as captivating as we did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our next exciting story. See you next time.